I was born on August the 16th, 1921, to Frank Verkamp and Julia Ann Cox. My dad was born in Newton County, Missouri, which is southwest of Springfield, Missouri. Lived there as a young child. In his early teens, they moved to Colorado to farm out there. My grandfather was a farmer. And then they returned when he was in his early 20s to the Springfield area. He had two surviving brothers. He'd lost a brother and two sisters in babyhood, and they're all buried in Newton County up around Springfield. My mother was born in St. James, and they lived on a farm north of St. James, about 3 miles. Her grandfather had came here when they built the railroad, and when the railroad was ended, it's between St. James and Rolla in 1865, he stayed here, homesteaded a farm and stayed out there. My grandfather came from a family that worked along the railroad, Coxes. There were several boys of them. And so he and my grandmother were married and found a farm out there. It's always called the Cox property. They had 5 children. They lost their first child also, and he's buried in the Cox Cemetery, which is not far from the house where Dee Freedy lives now. But mother was the youngest child and was always, they said, always a tease and everything. She went to school at Metlock School, walked every day, carried her lunch, all of them did. But when she became 16, she went to a year of high school and got her teaching certificate. Then she went to Newburgh to teach school for a couple years, then came back home to be on the farm with her family. She and Dad met at church, and Dad was almost 10 years older than Mother. But it took them a while to get acquainted, and they did marry when she was in 19 and 20. And she was 20 years old. She was born in 1900. So I was their first child. I was born in August of 21, and my dad had decided in 1919 he'd start a business in town because they lived on a farm south of town, and his 2 brothers were here and all, and he just wanted to spread out, I guess, a little bit. When I was born on East Cartall Street in what they call the Rowland House. I only remember, the main thing I remember that they always talked about, I had 3 months colic. I cried for 3 months. I eat anytime. So Edith Kurgan, who's the mother of Bill Marson, came over every evening and would push me up and down the street in a buggy and try to relieve me until my parents could get supper eaten and they could settle down a little bit. But anyway, when I was about 2, they moved down the street on South Jefferson down here, and where the Christian or the Methodist Church parsonage is. There was a little brick house at that time, small, neat, little, very comfortable for us. And there I received a brother, Bernard, and he was born 3 years, right close to my age, under my age. He was a big baby, weighed 10 pounds, and I know the doctor said he didn't think that Mother would ever have him. Then we moved down to the Licklider house, which was a tall, big white, I mean, most of the people should remember it. It was across the railroad from the lumber yard. It was a beautiful home, had a curving stairway in the front, wide, nice, and also a back stairway, which they call the servants' entrance. Of course, we didn't have any servants at that time. But there were a lot of memories built up there. And I remember one thing was that my cousin, or my mother's cousin from Salem, was a beauty operator. And she came over with her machinery and set up to give ladies in St. James permanents. Well, at that time, they had hung a thing from the ceiling and had all these wires draped down from it, and big rollers, and these rollers had paper with foil on them that they had put over each curl. Well, there was a lot of debris when the permanent was over. So to keep us out of trouble, she told Bernard and I that if we take the foil off of the papers, roll it in a ball, we could take it down and sell it. So we did. We spent all week, worked hard at it. We got in a big ball, put it in the wagon, and carried it down to the egg dealer, produce house, and he said, well, I can't buy that. So we had all our efforts put to naught, but at least I guess it kept us busy for the week. Another experience I had when we lived in that house, and I don't know whether it was nosiness or what, but I went town shopping with my mother, and we were walking home, and Kruger's had a hardware store right there at Mike Hofstadter's, to the west end of Mike Hofstadter's present building. It was a hardware store. We came out the door, and there was a big rock there as a step, and there was this pretty little gold thing laying there, bright, about an inch long or something, and I picked it up and sneaked it in my pocket. Took it home, and I couldn't figure out what it was. So rather than ask, I got the hammer and went out in the back step there on the concrete and hit it a couple times, and it exploded, and I ran. I thought I was killed. And my dad heard it at the lumberyard. He ran across the tracks. My mother came out, and I can't remember for sure where I hid, but I got behind the bushes. I got somewhere, but it was a .22 bullet, and I had hit. So I was lucky. I've considered myself later, but that was the kind of things that I got into at that house that I particularly remember. But anyway, we had a lot of fun with our grandparents living there, and then they moved to their little new house, and we had a teacher move in upstairs, and they had a new baby while they were there, and that was an experience for us. But then during this time, my grandma and grandpa Verkamp out at the farm where Jack Crafton lives now, they had built that when they came here in 1909 or 10, I think. But my grandmother became an invalid too. So Grandpa decided to build a new house down on the main road, which is where Amelie lives now. And they finished it up. It was a very nice house. And when time came to move, in those days there were no ambulances or anything. So the three sons, Ed, John, and Dad, and Grandpa, put her on a stretcher or mattress or something and carried her through the woods and down the hill to the new house. And her bed is the little bed that we have now in the bedroom, a little 3-quarter bed. And she laid in that then until she died. And Mother would take us kids and go out there and maybe spend 3 or 4 days at a time cooking up and taking care of her, you know. But then she died at, I can't remember, I think it was 26 or 27, 1927. And left my grandfather and my uncle, who was a single man, John, Uncle John, living there alone. And another thing that, I don't know whether any of you ever heard of it, but the house was built with 2 doors. And at that time, 2 front doors. They believed that you went in one of those, and when you died, they carried you out the other one. And it came true for them in this instance. But anyway, Dad felt, at that time, Dad had the lumberyard and all, and he began to worry about his father and his brother out there and all. And so Grandpa asked if we'd consider moving out there. So they discussed it, I'm sure that, and we weren't aware of it, Bernard and I, but they decided that they would. But Mother said she had to have a bathroom. She would not use the little building out the back. So they put in septic system, first one that had ever been. They got a Delco system, so we'd have electricity. They got a furnace. It was a, what they call it, only one opening to the upstairs, big, about a 3-foot square grate. But that's how the whole house was heated, but it's a wood furnace. They did that, and they put an inside bathroom with a bathtub and a stool for her. My grandpa and my Uncle John didn't use it. They still used their necessary house, but that was all right. But they slept in one bedroom in the back, and Bernard and I had the other bedroom. And in the 3rd bedroom, they built it larger for Mom and Dad. It was right off the kitchen. So we lived there several years, and then my uncle developed cancer, Uncle John. Only that in those days it was not called cancer. I don't know if it had a name. But anyway, he went back and forth to St. Louis to the doctor on the train. And I remember they talked about they would tap him and drain the fluid on him. So one day they say he passed away. So they brought him out on the railroad, and they brought him out, and again, they carried him in one door and out the other. And at that time, you sat up all night because there were no funeral homes as such. And I can remember that time because we had cousins come from Arkansas for the funeral. And I remember getting up during the night, and all these men were sitting in the kitchen having coffee and talking and everything all night long. And then, of course, they had the funeral. So that left Grandpa there then with us. Growing up there was quite an experience, and I know I had a great life, Bernard and I. And then I remember during the summer when Uncle Ed, who lived down the road about a quarter of a mile, the brick house that's still there, they put up hay. And so we kids were expected to help. And at that time they had a horse pull thing, and they would drop this fork down into the bale of hay or the loose hay on your wagon, and then they'd close the fork, and then the horse you'd drive the horse down, I don't know, maybe 200 feet and stop, and then they'd pull the trigger and it would loosen that hay. It would fall out of that fork down into the barn. So that was Bernard and my chore every summer. We did this growing up. And we had this old horse, Dick, we called him, big, big horse. We have pictures of him. And that we were expected to do that. One year we received as pay 2 billy goats, Billy and Bob. And somebody, I don't know whether my grandfather or my uncle, made a farm wagon. It was all painted in the green with the little red stripes on it. It was a typical farm wagon. And we'd hitch those goats to that farm wagon and go anywhere we wanted to around the house, you know. But we were expected to do our work. We gathered the eggs and we milked. And this day I don't like milk. I never did drink it. But we each one had a heifer, and we had a stool, and we were expected to milk that heifer every night. Back then, of course, we did a lot of canning. We had a garden every year, heavy garden. And it was quite a ways from the house. We'd have to go down and work and then haul the stuff back up. In the fall one year, a couple times, we made apple butter. And this man that came to help Mom and Dad with it, I remember, the main thing I remember about the whole operation was that he put 4 silver dollars in the bottom of the kettle. And then he stirred with the paddle back and forth. And he said that would keep it from sticking. And apparently it worked because we always had good apple butter. There was no problem there at all. One year in the garden, we had a big garden and planted a lot of things, and here we had the best watermelon crop you ever saw. Beautiful big watermelons, but they didn't get ripe. So it began to get fall and frost, and so Grandpa said, well, we'll go down, haul them up, put them in the basement, and they'll ripen in the basement. So Bernard and I got the little wagon, and we went down and we hauled watermelons, which were big. They were like a big piece of wood. And we stacked them in the basement. Well, Christmas came and it was time to get rid of them, and they weren't ripe, but they were citron. But nobody had ever told us or heard, and somehow we got citron seed instead of watermelon seed. So we lost the crop, and it was very discouraging to think all those beautiful melons never did ripen. We just couldn't do anything with it. Butchering. Dad had a friend, Mr. Joe Beck, lived out north of town. And of course we raised our own hogs. And we had butchered there, and he'd come out and help us. So the one thing I particularly remember, that hogs have lights, whatever they are. But the first thing he did was to blow those lights up and give them to Bernard and I. And they looked like balloons. And all day we played with the balloons. And I remember one of them got onto the bed, and we had to get out the next day. It was all covered with dust and everything. But I've never heard anybody talk about it since. But this old man knew how to do this. Then he also used the casings to put the sausage in. And he washed those, and he washed them, and he washed them. I can remember him washing them. Another thing he did was make blood sausage for us. And I don't hear much about that either anymore. But then the next year he came back to butcher again, and so my dad said, it's time, Margaret, for you to make some casings. So he got some material, and my mother couldn't sew a stitch, but we had a sewing machine, and I learned how to stitch across the heel of it and then down the long side. And then they would stuff that casing full of sausage and smoke it out in the smokehouse. So that was my start of sewing in my lifetime. But it was interesting now that I think about it. One time, well, I was going down to the bottom. We worked down the bottom. We'd haul hay down there at the far barn. And this time, and I was always barefooted. I wore overalls, and I was always barefoot. Went barefoot all summer. So I don't know what we were doing, but anyway, I was running across this field, and there was a path where the cows always went down to the creek, and I was running, and just as I ran and stepped down, this snake went under my foot. And that was an experience too. I think I jumped 3 feet tall, that cold thing. But evidently it was a tame one, and it was as scared as I was, because I didn't have any ill effects from that. But I remember that scared me pretty badly. We were lucky that Dad and Grandpa always, anything we wanted to do, they'd always help us. So one year after hay season was over, they decided to build us a slide. And that house out there sat on this steep little hill or knoll in front of the yard. So they fastened a pulley to a tree up on the top and then one at the bottom. And Grandpa made rollers. And you'd get a hold of this, you'd go up a step ladder and you'd grab a hold of the piece on the wire, and then you just sail down there, kind of like a ski lift or something. And we had a couple boys that came out all summer long to play with Bernard and I, and Keith Abernathy and Charlie Bremer. And Charlie Bremer's dad owned a grocery store, meat market here in town, and our oldest brother worked for him in it. And this boy ate very little food, but he loved boiled ham. So they'd come out, and on Saturday we'd go to the creek and put us up a little table or something on that, and all he'd bring would be boiled ham to eat. And the other three of us would have peanut butter and jelly or something. But we played out there. But anyway, when we built this glide, he was afraid of it. He just didn't know if he wanted to do that or not. Well, we all did. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. When you got to the bottom, you dropped off of that thing, you know. So finally we talked into him and to do it, and he got up there and he started down. And I guess the wire had been used too much and it broke. And when he fell, all the mechanism hit him in the mouth. Well, he bled, you know, and he was just killed. So we had to call Lawrence, the grocery store, and he came out and got him and took him back home. He wasn't hurt very bad, but he was scared. But we didn't play on that thing very much after that then. Also, when I got to the 5th grade, and I don't know why, but my folks decided to send me to Cuba to the Catholic boarding school. And that was quite an experience. They'd take me down on Sunday evening, and I'd stay all week, and they'd pick me up on Friday evening and come home for 2 days. And I'd never been around the nuns that much, although I had an aunt that was a nun, and that they were very strict, and I really did learn. There's no problem with that at all. But I made friends, and some of them I still have today, but I really don't know why. They just thought I'd get more of a religious education, I think, than anything. The second year, why Bernard was going to go, I was in the 6th, and he would have been in the 3rd. So we got him ready, and he got all his stuff, and we went down to the school. Well, the first night, he stayed till midnight, and they finally got him through that night, but the next day, Mom and Dad had to come get him. And he stayed home all week. Well, next week we tried it again, and same thing happened. And the third time, he just got sick, and that was the end of his schooling down there. But I did spend 2 years there, and I did learn a lot. And then my sister was born when I was 12, and a little girl. And I had no idea we were going to get anything or anything, but that's all right. But anyway, then 2 years later, my mother's brother died. And so in the meantime, his widow, who was my mother's sister-in-law, because it was her brother that died, wanted to go to California with her brother-in-law and sister. So they wanted Mom to go with them and take care of Aunt Ruth. So after much discussion, they decided I could take care of Rita and be on the farm with Dad and all. And Grandpa was still living. And so she went. Well, they were going to stay, I think, 10 days or something. They stayed over 2 weeks. And in the meantime, the tomatoes all came in to be canned, you know, it was the garden and all. And so I learned to can that summer. But we got along fine, but that was a growing up thing for me too, because having a responsibility, and of course Dad came to work every day. That left Grandpa and Bernard and Rita and I there at the farm. And I learned a lot that year too. The fall that I was 12 years old, and Rita was born in September of that year, and I just finished Cuba boarding school in the 6th grade, and so I came back to St. James to go into the 7th grade. And at that time, I don't think they called it junior high. But anyway, there was a new boy in class, and his name was Ira Wilson. And I knew of him because his My Uncle Tim Cox, mother's brother, married his Aunt Ruth, his dad's sister. So we've always said that Carl Cox was our double cousin. But anyway, he was new in the class. But I already had a friend I'd had for 2 or 3 years as such down through the years, so I wasn't too much interested at that time. And he immediately liked somebody else too in the 7th grade. So then we went to 8th grade, and we graduated from the 8th grade together. We still hadn't seen that much. We knew, we were friends, but wasn't anything more than that. His folks moved to Rolla, out on the farm south of Rolla. So they stayed up there through the winter, and then the next year they came back to St. James. And so I was a sophomore then, and he was a freshman, and he started playing basketball for St. James. And he came to the lumberyard and worked after school or extra there, I remember. And he was able to drive, but I couldn't drive it. At that time, we still weren't particularly interested. But at those days, they had freshman initiation and then a sophomore party to replace it. So when that sophomore party, I was going to stay all night in town with my grandmother, Cox, because we lived in the country and I couldn't drive or anything. So he told Dad he would take me back to Grandma Cox and walk me back there after the ball game, or after the party. Then I graduated and I went to St. Louis to Webster for a year. And by that time, Dad was in poor health, and he kind of wanted me to come back home and go into the lumberyard. So I did. And then he went to school here. Well, then after he graduated the next year, he went to Illinois to work. And he was coming home one weekend, Labor Day weekend. And this friend that worked in the grocery store with him over there, Lawrence and all, they were coming around the curve at Lambert Airfield, and they were hit head on. The boy with him was killed. He pitched, of course that was before seatbelts, and he pitched forward and was killed. So they got him to St. Louis County Hospital there. But the only identification he really had was his Social Security card. And he'd worked at Strawback's drugstore all through high school, before school and after school every day and all. And so Mr. Strawback's name, excuse me, was on the Social Security card. So they called him and told him that this boy was there and he was seriously injured, that somebody needed to come or identify or do something. Well, they lived out on the farm, Grandma and Grandpa did, when Mr. Strawback called them, and Ira had the car. So they didn't know what to do, and they called the coach, or somehow the coach got into it, and the coach took them and me and Jim Ed down to the hospital to see him. And by the time we got there, they had him pretty well taken care of, but he got a hole right straight through here, but luckily it punctured, and then he had a bad cut back here. He was pretty well bunged up, but anyway, they got him home then. So he didn't go back to Illinois to work anymore then. He went to work in the rice sticks factory over here. Because of the accident, and they took me down there with them, we had been going out together for quite a while at that time. And of course, when he came back here then to live and all, we kept going steady. And then he got the call to the Army, and we were planning we would get married, but we didn't know when, because circumstances were not that neither one of us had money or anything, and we were young. He was sent to Jefferson Barracks, of course, for the weekend and to check out where he would go. So Bertha Cardetti and I went down to see he and Pino Cardetti, her friend, and spent the weekend down there. But we didn't get to see too much of him because of the Army regulations and all. And then I think on Tuesday he shipped out to Camp Arkley, Texas, which we'd never heard of. So this was in March, early, yeah. And then in June, Dorothy Smith, whose friend had gone with him, older, he was 10 years older than Ira. And they'd gone together for 10 years. So she worked at the bank and she got 2 weeks vacation. And she asked me if I would go with her to see him, and I said, yeah, I would. And so we drove down there to see him, and didn't get to see much of them, but we saw some of them. But what I didn't know was that she decided she was going to get married when she got down there. All those years they'd never got married. So we rented a room in a house, she and I, and we'd go out to camp to get them when they were free. And so they were going to get married on Saturday afternoon. We made the arrangements at the church and everything was done. And they were married, and then, well, I didn't know what to do, and because they were married now, so then we decided that we'd get married. So my mother wouldn't let me go by myself, so she and Dorothy and I drove to Texas to get married. And of course he wasn't Catholic then, we had to get all these papers fixed up and all. And he got the license, he was able to get to town to get the license. And we met him and Jean, I'll wear it out there. And the arrangements had been made at the church for us to be married and everything. And then we went to a restaurant. Well, the little country folks, we didn't think, no motels, no hotels, rooms. We drove, was it 40 miles? To Sweetwater, Texas, to spend the night. And so then we had to get back the next morning, get Mom on the train, I think at 10 o'clock or something. We came back in, got her to her hotel, and took her, put her on the train. And we had no place to live. She went off and left us down there. So we spent the rest of that day looking for a place to live, and we found a nice house, bedroom, and had, well, it had 2 bedrooms. And the lady that owned it stayed in 1 bedroom, and then there's another bedroom behind, and then we had the dining room, what would be the dining room, but we made a bedroom. And so we lived there then, and she could stay a month. We were gonna stay there a month. So when she got ready to come back after the month, then I decided we were able to manage, with some help from our folks, that I stayed on. And he got in on Wednesday night, anywhere from 6 to 8:30 or 9, and leave the next morning at 5 o'clock. And then he'd get in on Sunday or Saturday from I don't know what time, anytime from noon on. You never knew, because, you know, and he got to stay till Monday morning to get back on the bus early. And the rest of my time I had nothing to do. I was just down there, you know. I did a lot of handwork, and the little old lady next door lived in 1 room, rented out her rest of her house to make money. But anyway, I really liked her. She was cute. She used snuff, wasn't it? And I'd never seen anybody do that. But let's walk to town, or let's do that. And she did a lot for me. Then another one of his sergeants, his wife from Arkansas came down, and they had a little boy, about a year old. And I got acquainted with her, and so then we spent a lot of time together. And so then Christmas was coming, and we got some help from our folks. But in the meantime, Bernard was going to go into service in January. So Mom and Dad gave him the money, thought he'd want to come down and spend some time with Christmas with us or something before we got back. Well, he came down, he carried a chicken, wasn't it, or something along, and the time he got there, it spoiled. So we didn't have much chicken dinner. But anyway, he was there a couple of days before he came back home. We got to visit with him. So when he went to St. Louis to get the train to go back, the only way I had to go to the doctor or anything was by train from here. Went back and forth on the train. We went in that morning, and he met his 3 buddies from Kansas City down there. And so I got to see them before they all left. And they left me standing there in the station, very pregnant and alone and scared and everything else. But that's the way everybody lived at that time. You know, the war was terrible. And the baby was born on April 22nd, and she had spinal bifida, which I'd never heard of. And the doctor said that she would not survive, maybe a short time. So he insisted that I not bring her home because I lived in St. James. And so I was in the hospital 2 weeks, and Dad came down and got me, and I had to go off and leave her there. And still had no transportation back and forth except a train or a bus. And he told me not to try to come back and not to, you know, be too hard on me. Anyway, I did get to go back one time with some neighbors. They took me down. They had a boy down there. And he knew it. You know, we got word to him in England, told him. Then, of course, he went in on D-Day, or D-Day to us too, and she died the 30th of June. And the doctor called me at the lumberyard and told me. And I was grateful for that, because he was he was not a baby doctor. He born them, but he didn't take care of them. But he watched her, and he took care of her the whole time at St. John's. And I always will think good of them for what they did for us at that time, because I don't know what I'd have done with him overseas and all. But then, and I said, dumb little me, I thought the Red Cross would bring him home, you know, to lose a child. But he was in the middle of fighting. It was in a bad time of fighting. And it was almost 2 weeks, wasn't it, before he even got the word that she had passed away. And during that time, his buddies stayed with him. They said 3 days somebody was with him constantly. They never left him. And so we survived it, but it was a very good time.